On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody. I'm here with my guest, Connor Rooney of the Chicago Cubs organization. Connor, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Thanks for having me on. My name's Connor Rooney. I'm the rehab strength and conditioning coach for the Chicago Cubs. This is the start of my third year now. When I was initially hired on, I was actually the rehab hitting coach and helped out on the pitching side for a little bit. And then about halfway through that year, we had a mix-up in our strength and conditioning department. Our rehab strength coach ended up going up to the big leagues. So that opened up a spot for me in the weight room where I had more of a background. So I transitioned into the rehab setting in the strength and conditioning field there. Last season I was in Double-A Tennessee, and then this year I'm back with the rehab group. So excited to be back with that rehab group. It's a great group of guys, and back at the complex here.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of work with rehab, admittedly, but I always like to be around that group. It's always fun. Um, I would imagine being in the complex probably gives you a little bit more of like a stability roots aspect versus like being at Double-A bouncing around. So I'm sure that's something
Yeah.
that you like as well.
Yeah, that's been nice. Obviously at the complex, getting to go home every night, more of a set routine, not traveling, living out of a duffel bag in a hotel. So
So talk to me about like being a rehab hitting coach and then strength and conditioning. Like, tell me about your journey because it seems like you have a lot of actual like baseball coach experience as well as strength and conditioning. So kind of talk to me like from the jump, what is the beginning of your journey to your present spot now?
yeah, so I grew up in Lacey Township, New Jersey, which is, if you were to draw a line straight south of New York City, straight east of Philadelphia, it's almost smack dab in the middle there. So it's a pretty good sports area, a lot of competition area. Todd Frazier come out of the town right next to me. But I grew up playing football, basketball, baseball. I wrestled. My dad's really big into martial arts, so he had me and my sister into martial arts from the time we could walk. So did a lot of karate. Ended up just playing football and baseball throughout high school. And then it was pretty clear I was just going to play baseball in college. So I ended up going to the University of Tampa. Ended up transferring out after a year or two there and ended up at Kaiser University, which is a smaller NAIA school in West Palm Beach. And that's where I really got involved with the strength and conditioning field, just trying to figure out what could make me better as a player. So I was just researching everything I could, watching YouTube videos, asking everyone in the gym what I could do to throw harder. And that kind of led me to where I'm at now. I had a professor named John Crimmins at Kaiser University who was always pushing me to get to that exercise science field. Um, by the time I graduated Kaiser, I had a grad assistant job at Coastal Carolina, where I was doing both pitching and strength and conditioning work over there. Due to the time I was there, I only got to work mostly with the strength and conditioning department with Nick White, who's now with the Baltimore Orioles. But he was a great mentor while I was there. About 2 months into that job, I actually got offered an internship at Driveline out in Seattle. So I moved away from Coastal, moved to the other side of the country, up in Seattle, Washington, and began my internship there. Ended up getting hired on full time, and then I was there for about 2 years until Driveline decided to open up a new location down in Phoenix, Arizona. So I moved down there with a few of the other trainers from pitching and hitting with Driveline, opened up that location, and then the opportunity with the Cubs came. So I originally had interviewed for a strength and conditioning role. That didn't end up working out. And then I got a call a few months later from the farm director with the Cubs, and he said he had this rehab role open. I'd get to work a little more on field and also work with the strength and conditioning department. And I thought it was a great fit. So I hopped on that. Worked mostly with the hitting guys. So I was hitting fungos, throwing BP, which I'm not a good BP thrower. If you ask any of those hitters that I had early on, I could back up to the mound and throw from there, but the 45-foot BP was real tough for me. But I learned as I went. And then, yeah, I transitioned right into the weight room, and I've been more on the weight room side ever since.
With your diverse background, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, like what is your long-term outlook? Do you think you're just going to kind of let it ride, see where it takes you? Is it like big league strength and conditioning? Is it big league coach? Is there somewhere in the middle? Is it like, how do you envision it's a very unique skill set that you have. Like you have some hitting experience, you have some pitching experience. I see you throw weighted balls. I know you know how to like get down the mound. Like I would imagine you can talk the language much better than most traditional like meathead strength and conditioning coaches. And then also you have the rehab aspect of like bringing guys back. So like, what do you envision for yourself, or is it just like you're open to whatever kind of fits to you long term?
Yeah, I'm honestly open to anything. I just love helping guys perform well on the field. So whether that's more in the pitching role, I obviously love strength and conditioning. That's where my heart is. So I'd like to stay with that. Ideally, I'd like to do a little bit of both, which might be a little selfish of an ask. But I love being involved in both sides of that, both the skill and in the weight room. That's why I love the rehab role that I'm in now, especially at the complex, is I get a better opportunity to work with pitching and hitting and, medical and strength and conditioning more than if I was at the affiliate like last year, where I'm a little more pigeonholed into, just strength and conditioning.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I think with the way the game is going, I think more positions like that are going to be opening up in the future as front offices start to see the value of both sides and people that can speak both languages and really do it at a high level. So I would be interested to have a conversation with you in 5 years to see like where you're at and what you've learned. But while I have you here for now, so first, one thing that I have to mention is that like your dad making you do martial arts at a young age, like I wholeheartedly, I'm not going to have kids, but if I ever had kids, wholeheartedly believe that they should do some sort of martial arts as an early on, like in their life, just for spatial awareness and body control and really just like the confidence aspect of it. So, do you think that that had some correlation to you with like your playing career is just like that kind of well-rounded as a child, or was it just God given? You were able to just throw hard and you researched to like get better as you went on.
Yeah, I think a lot of those qualities definitely carried over. Like I can remember all the like rolling and tumbling that we learned doing karate, which is, something we're teaching our guys now. So I definitely had the benefit of learning that when I was, 4, 5, 6 years old, and then carried it through the time when I was in high school. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of those qualities definitely helped me later on in life. Like you said, the spatial awareness, just not being afraid to interact with the ground or a wall, being able to, hit a wall and understand, okay, I got to tuck my shoulder like this to roll, and then I'm fine. Where a lot of people, I think they kind of, they dive, and that's where you see some weird injuries happen because they don't practice interacting with the ground or a wall or other objects like that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that we are like teaching kids to do it nowadays. I say kids, but like players in different settings. And you can almost tell the ones that have a background in it versus the ones that don't. And even if they haven't practiced it for a long time, it's like, oh, I remember doing this as a kid. And then all of a sudden they're like rolling around. And like my wife and I have recently gotten into rock climbing. And as a kid, I was never like, climbing a tree. I was never like jump off of high stuff. Like I was kind of scared to like get hurt because I thought it would affect me playing sports. And
Yeah.
now I do all this stuff and it's like taking me some time to grasp it. But I'm like, man, if I would have done this stuff as a kid, and I look around and there's like 7 year olds in the rock climbing gym that are just doing crazy things and like they just have no fear. And I'm like, these kids are like set up to be successful in athletic endeavors when they get older. And like, I am learning it the hard way at 31 years old. Like, I probably should have done this stuff a lot younger in my life. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting to see when you do stuff like that, how different athletes interact with the ground, interact with the wall, how well they're able to control themselves or not, and how athletic they look or not look. And I think sometimes guys are becoming so robotic right now that things like that are really, really valuable and underappreciated. Um, but again, the guys that can do it, like you can just see it like, oh yeah, you must have done some sort of martial arts as a kid or some sort of gymnastics as a kid or
Yeah.
something, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I was doing splits until I was 10 years old." Like I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to train that stuff later on in life.
Yeah, it really is. It really, really is. Take it from me directly. Sometimes it sucks, but
Yeah.
so you've been in baseball the last few years. So what is your best professional baseball story that you have thus far?
Ooh. So I would say last year, when I was in Tennessee, we were doing pretty good most of the year. We were back and forth. We ended up losing out on the first half by about a half a game to Chattanooga. They had a great squad that year. And in the second half, I think we won something crazy, like 15 or 16 straight out of the All-Star break. And we had a great lead on first place. And towards the end of that second half, that lead started dwindling away. And then it was like our whole North Division was losing. So we were still in first place, but it was getting really tight. And I think coming with like 2 or 3 weeks in the season left, we ended up losing about nine straight. And I think it was at one point 14 of 16, and we were only up by 2 games. So we had a home game, and it's about 30 minutes before first pitch, and our bat boy wasn't there. Um, so our clubby actually called in one of his friends to be the bat boy for the day. He was a maintenance guy around the stadium, and he was about 45 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And he got all up in the uniform, put eye black on, put wristbands on, and he was killing it. And we won that day. So we made him come back the next day. We won again. And then the next 2 weeks, I think we won the last 12 of the 14, swept the playoffs, and won the championship. So he was our good luck charm. We ended up bringing him on the playoffs. We brought him to Chattanooga, brought him to Pensacola, and the road bat boys just got to kind of sit there and watch a game while he worked. And he was our lucky charm for that playoff run. But that was an awesome experience.
Oh my goodness. Baseball is so hilarious with
Yeah.
superstitions and things like that. And in 21, we were kind of on a roll, and then we kind of started slumping, and then we're coming down to the stretch. Same thing as you guys. And we wore our like yellow City Connect jerseys, and we won. And then it's like, all right, well, we have to wear them again. And then we won again. And then we won. And it was getting to the point where there were rumors floating around that like MLB had to decide whether they were going to let us wear them in the playoffs or not. And it's like, it's just a jersey. But to them, it's like, no, I don't want to change a thing. And it's like, do
Oh,
you
yeah.
really think like the jersey is what helped you win? Like, do you really think it was the bat boy? And they're like, yes, I really do. And it's crazy. Like, they really wholeheartedly believe that. And it's a hard line to draw between like superstition and preparation and like just having your routine versus just having something that's just absolutely eyewash but you just believe in it. And like baseball specifically is just so hard to draw that line. Like I've been around guys that like if somebody helps them with their belt before the game to tighten it and they get 2 hits in the game, like that guy's got to get his belt tightened every day until he hits a slump. And then there's something else that like he needs to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at 6:28 every day because he had 3 hits one night. Or a pitcher did a med ball series and he went 7 shutty, so then he's got to do the same med ball series. It's really a tough line to like figure out. And sometimes you just got to be like, you know what? Forget about it. Let's just do it. Like, I'm not going to fight you on it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
the thing is, if you're winning, like, who cares? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you're losing, it's like, sometimes you just go searching down these weird rabbit holes of like, I wore the wrong spikes. That's why I didn't steal that bag and we lost. It's
Yep.
like, no, I don't think that's it. Like maybe, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
But it's just, I feel like everybody probably has some sort of story of like just superstition just taking too far in
Oh,
baseball. And
yeah.
it's just hilarious that you guys rode it all the way to a championship.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome.
That's awesome. So what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
So I might get some flack on this one, but I think especially with how like familiar I am with the skill side, I think that active and passive range of motion screens are, I don't want to say, I don't want to say useless because I'll get to that point, but I think they're very overrated and like over implemented in terms of like these strength and conditioning programs that guys are putting out. So I'll explain that a little bit, but I think if you have an athlete on the mound, he's pain free and he's moving well, skill side's happy with how he's moving either on the mound or in the box. I just think he needs a well-rounded, like just good training program. I don't think you need to fight for, 10 degrees of hip IR because his passive test on the table showed that he was deficient in hip IR, but on the mound, he's moving fine and he's pain-free. Um, Obviously, I look at them like I think they're useful in those cases where a guy is not moving the way you want on the field, or if he's having, pain. So that's when I'll kind of go back, look, hey, how's he moving on the table? How's he moving in the weight room? Is this affecting the skill? Is it affecting how he's moving down the mound? Is it affecting how he's moving in the box, his sprint mechanics, stuff like that. But I think just blindly giving guys, a hip range of motion routine or, improve their shoulder IR because you're not happy with how it is on the table, but it's fine on the field. I think that's kind of where I disagree with the movement screen aspect there.
Okay, yeah, I can get on board with that, and I do have some follow-up questions. So, is there any range of motion stuff that you look at directly from the field, whether it be like Kinetrax data or anything like that to help inform decisions? Or are you just like, if he's pain-free, let him ride? You know what I mean?
No, I use Kinetrax a lot. We have that with the Cubs. And then when I was at Driveline, we had our own motion capture system. And our guys would go through there every 6 weeks. So at the end of their 6-week training block, they would hop back in the lab, throw off the mound. And then we would get that data back typically within 24, 48 hours. So that's where I would first look. And then if it was like, hey, this guy's not rotating his pelvis well down the mound, is it an issue in his movement screen? So then I'll go to the passive range of motion screen and okay, like his hip IR is limited here. So we could probably dose in some, different loading schemes in the weight room, maybe some extra hip mobility on this guy, implement that for the next 6 weeks, get him back in the lab, retest it. Did that improve? Yes or no? But when I was at Driveline, we tested our motion capture system, an active range of motion test and a passive range of motion test, and it basically just told us we had no idea what we were looking at. So I kind of saw that, and it made me really think because before that I went like I loved the movement screens. I was like, all right, this guy's limited in overhead flexion. I need to give him more work for overhead flexion in the weight room. And then I kind of saw all that data come from the study we ran. And it basically told me that all of that was false. And it was just like, okay, some guys don't have it on the table, but they do it on the mount. And then some guys are the opposite. They have it on the table, they don't have it on the mount. And that's just kind of where like having the context of, like I mentioned before, is this guy in pain? Is he performing well? Is it actually limiting him in the throw? And I think that's where the joint conversations come with the skill side and the medical side, as well as obviously with myself in strength and conditioning.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing in baseball. Just, some guys have certain adaptations that allow them to be successful. And those adaptations are like red flags on a screen, especially in comparison to general population like data, which has always confused me of like, if he falls outside of this range of motion, like this is dangerous. And it's like, well, one, you're comparing it to like general pop. Two, like he's within his own normative like range of motion. Like I think he's probably fine. And three, like he's pitching well. But that same guy, as soon as he's not pitching well, it's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And it's like there might not be anything wrong physically. It might be a mental thing. It might be a lineups thing. It might be a usage thing. Like there's any number of explanations, and that's not to say we shouldn't look, but I don't know, I've always had a hard time, like I'm not sure there's any one really good screen other than like watching the game and watching how they perform. And then if you can get like Kinetrax data on them, that's great. If you can get on like the force mounds or the the batters boxes that have the force plates built in, that's probably a more realistic assessment. But it's just hard for me to look at something like an FMS and be like, this guy's going to be a good player or this guy's not going to be a good player. It's really hard for me to like buy into that.
Yeah. And that's something I honestly like. I've been training myself to throw 100 since I graduated college. Like always in the back of my head, I was like, I can do it. And maybe one day I'll sign. And like, obviously that's not a thing anymore, but I still like to train and I do it. But I remember just doing an hour of mobility every night just to see nothing improve on the skill side. But like my table tests got way better. I was moving great. And I was terrible on the mount. So it's just more of a skill acquisition issue than for me than, hey, do I have this like general capacity of motion?
Yeah, that's kind of the sweet spot, right? Is like I think a lot of guys are so physically developed that they just need skill acquisition sometimes. And then it's like, what does that process look like for skill acquisition? And I was having this conversation with somebody relatively recently. It's like baseball coaching side is learning things about how to coach people that strength coaches have known for years. Like, this guy might be a visual learner. This guy might be like, you need to actually put your hands on him. This guy
Yeah.
can get away with like actual just cues, like even within the cues. Some people need internal, some people need external. And the coaches are coming to us and they're like, dude, I just figured this out about this guy. And you're in the back of your mind, you're just like, bro, I've known about this for years. But on the out, you gotta be like, dude, that's awesome. Like, let's roll with that. And I don't know if it's like a lot of coaches have just become like they're just former players that have become coaches. So they just kind of regurgitate their same message or what it is. But it feels like strength and conditioning coaches have put a lot of emphasis on continuing education of like communication skills, coaching skills, specific practice. And now like the baseball coaching side is starting to catch up to that. Because for the longest time when I was in the minor leagues, it was like the baseball coaches don't do anything in the offseason. They just hang out. And we were like constantly going to seminars, constantly doing continuing education. And now it seems like there's all of these, the 108 and like the Pitchapalooza and all of these like continuing ed conferences that strength coaches are going to, athletic trainers are going to, baseball coaches are going to, and it's finally getting to this point where like there's this common language amongst everyone. And now it's like, okay, we can kind of weed out some of this stuff that we've been doing for so long that really we've probably just been doing because we do it. It's not really that valuable, which is exciting for the game. But then on the other side, it's like there is still some general stuff that we need to look at that's probably worthwhile that we can't throw it out completely. So it seems like it's an interesting time in the game for everybody. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why I think we're very lucky with the Cubs here to have the group we have. Like our AAA strength coach was an assistant pitching coach a few years back at Maryland. Our complex pitching coordinator, who's new this year, he's a former strength coach. So we have a lot of different employees with diverse backgrounds, similar to like myself, where I think that language is much easier understood amongst these groups in terms of, like you said, like I've been a part of different organizations or where you're saying one thing and someone's looking at you like you got two heads, and then it takes you 10 minutes to figure out you're talking about the same exact thing.
Yes, it's been a long battle to get there, and I think it's finally getting there. And it's like Rachel got the position as like she's the minor league farm director or whatever with the Marlins, and it's like
Yeah.
a strength coach can go into the front office and still do really well. But can a front office member come and be a strength coach? And I don't know. And it's the same with like the baseball coaches. Like I feel like most strength coaches, especially nowadays in pro baseball, could do those jobs. And like
Yeah.
I know like lineups and like the intricacies of the job are different, but like on a general picture of like understanding movement, understanding biomechanics, understanding the game of baseball, I feel like strength coaches could step into those roles, and hitting and pitching coaches are starting to be able to kind of speak the language of strength and conditioning. And I don't know if it's definitely not there yet, but the effort is being made to get there so that everybody's kind of on the same page, which honestly is really cool for the players because then the development process is so much cleaner, and there's less like miscommunication amongst the parties, at least in my experience.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there.
So before we get into that skill acquisition stuff and all of your training, let's talk like rehab and your actual job, your day to day. Like, what does your schedule look like, and how are you managing like the return to play timeline for different injuries with guys?
Yeah, so I'd say most of it typically starts the day before. So like at the end of the day, myself, the skill coaches, and then the medical department will all get together and meet and just go over the day. We have a list on the whiteboard, each guy's name, and we just spend anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes on a guy. And we just generally talk about how do you feel today, how do you do in his throwing progression, how do you do lifting, everything he had that day. And then from there, we'll kind of build out, the next few weeks worth of scheduling, and then the next day. Our exact schedule is a little tough, especially during spring training. With rehab, we kind of get tossed around different fields, different times, and we got to be on the fly about that. So we get thrown into the fire a lot with that. But we have a great group. Our medical guys are awesome. But basically, first thing in the morning, the guys will come into the training room, they'll do their treatment, then they'll flow into the weight room, and I'll have them do some like movement prep stuff before they go out to stretch. I'll run the full team through a dynamic stretch. And then from there, we just have the order. The guys will throw, they'll do their running right after they're done throwing. If the position players have to go hit, they'll go hit, and then everybody will kind of trickle into the weight room. Once they're done with their lifts, they'll go back into the training room, finish whatever treatment they have for that day. And then by that time, we're finishing up in the weight room. I'll kind of flow back in, and that's where we'll meet again and kind of go over that whole same thing again. We like to joke, it's just kind of like Groundhog Day with rehab. Same thing, very similar place, similar time every day. But it's really, really good. My guys who are early stages of rehab, they're going to be in the weight room just a little bit more and a little bit earlier. They don't obviously have the skill work to be doing, so we could do a little more in the weight room with them. They'll typically make their way into the weight room just a little bit earlier because they don't have to prep to go out on the field to throw or hit. So it kind of helps me out a little bit, dividing that group up between the early post-op guys earlier in the morning, and then I'll go out to stretch, I'll come back in, and then I'll have those guys who are a little farther out post-op.
Do you think just the monotony and the repetitiveness is the biggest obstacle that you face, like getting guys through, especially if somebody's like a long-term Tommy John and he's like, 3 or 4 months in, and it's like, dude, I'm never gonna like be back on the mound. Like,
Yeah.
is that the biggest obstacle you face, or are there other ones that you're kind of dealing with on a day-to-day as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say that mental side is huge, especially once the season starts and then guys are stuck in, Arizona at the complex and they see all their friends out there playing, having fun, and, playing in front of thousands of fans. I think that's where you really start to see guys kind of, just kind of, put their head down a little bit more. And, you got to just keep motivating them and let them know, hey, man, like there's light at the end of this tunnel. We're going to get you back there, whether it's, 4 months from now or a year from now. But you just got to keep chipping away one day at a time. But it's definitely that mental side, between guys. We've had guys who, missed 2, 3 seasons just due to, a recurring injury or 2 different injuries, mixing that COVID year. Some of the guys haven't played since, 2021, 2019. So a lot of guys have been out. And I think that mental side of just getting used to playing in front of people, pitching in front of fans again. But really that mental side, I think, is the biggest obstacle those players face getting back out there.
You guys have like a designated mental skills coach to rehab? Like, what is your team? Do you have any helpers? Are you the only strength coach? Like, on a typical rehab process, like who is involved in decision making?
So we do have a not a dedicated rehab mental health professional, but we do have one for the minor leagues, and she does a great job with the rehab guys. Her name is Samantha Kirchen, Dr. Samantha Kirchen. She's done a great job. She was a new hire this offseason, and I know the rehab players love her. I am the only strength coach in rehab, but our other strength coaches help me out a ton, whether it's, I got 5 guys on the floor and 3 guys that need to do force plate testing. They're great with helping me out, whether it's testing or watching them on the floor, doing their running. And then we have a physical therapist, an athletic trainer, and then an athletic training fellow who helps out. So some guys kind of get passed around. It's kind of a big group effort between the entire medical department and the entire strength department. And then we do have a dedicated rehab hitting coordinator. And then we have a rehab pitching coach. He also is the complex pitching coordinator. So once the season starts up, we'll do a lot more with the complex league team. He's also a new hire this offseason. His name's Matt Hinckley. But he's done a phenomenal job stepping in and just, getting thrown into the fire there.
I feel like it takes a big team to get each person through. And then even within the context of strength and conditioning, like you said, there might be a guy that's got like, a back issue versus a Tommy John. It's like, all right, well, one of the affiliate guys can take the guy with the back, and this is the Tommy John. And it's kind of like everybody just getting everybody through, especially in spring training. And then I'm sure once like extended hits, you can kind of like hone in on a couple of smaller guys. And then I would imagine you guys also have an AZL strength coach so that you're not like double dutying, or is that also on your plate?
Oh yeah, we do have a separate complex league strength coach, so that does take a lot off of my plate, not having to do both of those. Especially during the middle of the season, that rehab group will typically grow just a little bit. So it definitely helps me out a ton.
And then I'd imagine you're getting some long-term like big league rehabs as well. Like everybody's coming through the complex is your rehab case, or if it's a big league guy, is there like a separate big league rehab guy or girl?
Oh yeah, they'll I'll get all of them. So if it deems them coming to Arizona in the middle of the season, I'll work with them from the big leagues all the way down to rookie ball. Even some of the athletes we have at the complex in the Dominican, if they're going to be a longer stage rehab, they'll send them up to Arizona, and they'll do a lot of their rehab process with me here.
Oh, nice. That's actually kind of awesome. It gets them a little bit of exposure to the state side too. And I
Yeah.
think that's the one sneaky cool thing. Rehab's never cool, right? Like it's never a good thing to be in rehab. But when those big league guys are interacting with some of those younger guys, and the big league guy is really hungry to get back and is really pushing the rehab, it's almost like a culture thing for those younger kids to see them and be like, oh, this is so and so from the big leagues. Like this guy's putting in work. I got to put in work. And then that guy's like pushing him, or like, sometimes they buy food for the complex to like show the guys their support. And, they
Yeah.
all kind of bond together in that, especially for us, like being in Fort Myers is a little bit different than being in Phoenix. It's a little tougher to be down in Florida. There's just not as much to do down there. So I think, like I said, I've never been in that rehab setting, but just from the conversations I've had, it's like they almost bond together as like their own quote unquote like team. And
Yeah.
like when a guy has a live BP or his first bullpen after a Tommy John, like they'll all go out and like support each other, and they just become like this little family. And then one of them graduates and it's like a sad day that they leave, like they're losing
Yeah.
somebody from their team, even though it's great for that person, right? Because then they're getting to go out and play and everything. Is that kind of your experience as well with those guys?
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. We actually, funny you mentioned that everyone going to watch them, but we actually just had a guy graduate who had been in rehab the last 3 years. And then he had his first live BP last week, and I had guys asking me to stop their lift in the middle of their lift to run out to the field and go watch them. And they're like the whole medical department went out there, strength and conditioning, all the players were out there, and it was awesome. So yeah, just like you said, it's a great group. I mean, we had a guy as old as 32 and as young as 17 in rehab this offseason. So just the knowledge that, some of those older guys can pass on, even just on the baseball side of, stuff they've never been exposed to, like, even just how to act at an affiliate, or, like, hey man, these are the things I'm watching on days that I'm not pitching. It's a very tight knit group that, they don't like, unless they're in rehab, they don't really get the opportunity to be around those big league guys or some of those older veteran guys, who have that experience for them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I've seen, so say in a year, like a big league guy goes down to rehab at the affiliate. The next year in spring training, he's just like dapping up all these random minor league kids. And I'm like, how are you connected to that guy? And he's like, oh, I was rehabbing with this guy. We were here every day, 6 a.m., grinding it out down in Florida. Or, when I was in AA, I was having a great time with these kids as I was coming back. And like, it's cool. Those kids come up to the big leagues and they're like, man, so and so, like, he was a really good guy when he came to visit us at the affiliate. Like, they really do remember that and they really do appreciate that. And, hopefully they're never hurt, but if they are hurt and they're in rehab, they kind of can pass that along to that next generation. And I think that's something that's really been good in the game for a long time, is just like those big league rehab guys. Like obviously they want to get back, they want to get on the field, but they're also cognizant of those young kids and like, teaching them some valuable lessons that, like you said, they may never get those from anyone else. And coming from, big leaguers that are, high status, high celebrity, like it means that much more than, if you
Yeah.
or I told them like, hey, you got to tie your shoes or something like that. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like the
Yeah.
strength coaches are telling me to tie my shoes. But if, the ace on the big league team is like, hey, you got to tie your shoes. They're like, oh, yep, yep. and every
Yeah.
day their shoes are tied and double knotted, and and
Yeah,
it's
they'll
like
never
it
forget
just
that.
the message just means a little bit more coming from them. So it sounds like you have a really good time, man. And everybody that I talk to that does rehab is like, it's chaotic, it's all over the place. You have to adjust on the fly all the time, but I love it. And like all of them say the exact same message. I really do feel like they all just love the rehab aspect.
Yeah, like I said, it could be very monotonous at times, but it's a very different experience than, you'd have going to an affiliate or being a coordinator or anything like that.
Yeah, I like I said, I've never done it personally, but everybody I've talked to has just really enjoyed it, and they can't say enough, and all of them have said like, I am a much better coach because of my time as a rehab professional in baseball, and again, you face a number of different injuries. Most of them obviously are probably long-term Tommy Johns, but anything can kind of pop up in baseball. A guy could get hit in the face with a ball and have a long-term rehab. A guy could break a hand on a pitch inside. ACLs happen, low backs happen, hamstrings happen, and like being able to adapt to all of those and get them to work together and kind of assign them appropriately and really just be all over the place at once. I think is a really valuable skill no matter where you end up going in the future. So definitely something I'd probably recommend for other people. I probably should have taken my own advice as well instead of like running away from it and being like, yeah, I have no idea how to do this. But yeah, it sounds like you have a really good time down there, man. And
Yeah.
whatever it ends up being for you, I'm excited to just kind of see where that goes, whether you go pitching or hitting or strength and conditioning or some sort of like in between performance role. It seems like you're in a really good spot for yourself.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part one of this two-part episode with Connor. I hope you enjoyed this one. Obviously, we got into a bunch of the rehab stuff in this one, and in part two, we're going to get into blending skill acquisition, the weight room, on-field performance, and how it ties into his role as the rehab strength coach with the Cubs. 3 things that I took from Connor in this episode: understanding both the values and the limitations of movement screens can help with making quality programming decisions. Leaning on other members of your team can help you create a positive environment for your athletes. And there are a number of different avenues you can pursue to be a valuable member of a team, whether that's rehab or performance. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.